Ms. Gaines, as a father, I can't imagine what happened that day in that dressing room. Your day started with a man that was average at best in the sport of swimming, then claiming to be a woman or a transgender, changing in front of you and your teammates. Then your day ended with a man that tied you for the fastest time being awarded first place by the NCAA. As a young lady, you were failed at a bunch of different levels. It is unbelievable what you've been through, and I commend you and your family for being here today. I yield the rest of my time to Ms. Greene from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Strong. I'd like to continue back with talking about left-wing extremism. I think it's very important, this issue. I would like to remind everyone here, in the summer of 2020, the protests and violence in major cities all over the country were so intense, it caused over $2 billion in damage in America. This was nationwide in cities all over our country. The far-left groups that occupied Portland were there for over 100 days, causing over $2 million in damage to the federal buildings and local businesses. Seattle, protesters claimed several blocks, literally took it over in a neighborhood that they called Capitol Hill Autonomous Zones, or CHAZ, which is something that no one can comprehend. How an Antifa group and left-wing extremist group can come in and literally take over city blocks. And I just wonder, Ms. Spitalnik, as senior advisor on extremism at Human Rights First, which is a nonpartisan organization, have you studied Antifa?
No, I have not studied Antifa, but I am aware of the research that those who do study extremism across the spectrum has done that tells us that while, yes, on the left, there is oftentimes, to the extent left-wing violence exists, it tends to be focused on property damage and other acts along those lines, whereas on the right, for the most part, the violence tends to be manifesting in the sort of deadly mass acts of violence that we've been talking about here today. And so first and foremost,
I reclaim my time. Thank you. You're with a nonpartisan organization, nonprofit, which means you raise money in a nonpartisan fashion for extremism and human rights. And so you don't consider property damage for the American people. By the way, I'm a business owner. It's really hard to run a business, especially if the entire neighborhoods and area get set on fire night after night. The police officers are attacked. They're attacking federal courthouses and making the entire community literally unlivable. It's hard to have customers come in your store, especially when you own a store or maybe you have a Wendy's franchise that gets burned to the ground. So you don't consider that worth studying, the property damage and all of the violence that happens to the American people? I would think that you consider that something worth studying and caring about, especially in a nonpartisan organization.
Again, absolutely, there is left-wing violence that does exist in certain ways. But the point that I am making is that we cannot draw false equivalencies between property damage and the death of people by mass shooters who are targeting them based on their race, their religion, or other characteristics.
Well, what about their job or their profession, like being a police officer? We could talk about the city of Atlanta. That's the state I'm from. I'm from Georgia, as a matter of fact. And there's an Atlanta Public Safety Training Center in Atlanta. The Atlanta City Council has proposed a $90 million, that's taxpayer funded, by the way, $90 million from the taxpayers for the protection and the safety of the city of Atlanta. Well, this Antifa group has come in there and decided to take it over because they call it Cop City. You want to talk about human lives? Well, it seems to be that being a police officer is a target for Antifa because they actually murdered someone there. They actually murdered a police. Oh, you don't know. That's right, because you don't study left-wing extremism from your nonpartisan so-called nonprofit. But let me tell you about it. There was a 26-year-old activist, Manuel Tehran, shot and killed Georgia State Patrol trooper there. That was this year, you're right, not last year, it was this year. So left-wing extremism is definitely on the rise, and murder is a big part of it. I yield back, thank you.
Gentlelady yields back, and I recognize Mr. Crane for his